Indian Arrival Day in Trinidad and Tobago is celebrated annually on May 30th and marks the anniversary of the arrival of the first East Indian indentured immigrants to our shores. When the Fatal Razak arrived in the Gulf of Paria, it signified a new beginning. And from 1845 to 1917, 140,000 Indian immigrants were brought to work the plantations, bringing with them their unique way of life. Indian immigration to Trinidad would carve a new chapter in the country's development and radically change its social and ethnic makeup, and more importantly, contribute to the diversity of influences in the then increasingly multicultural landscape.
Slavery was abolished somewhere around 1838, and in the big colonies like Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana and Suriname, there was need for labor. Because after emancipation, the slaves left the sugarcane estates in droves because they associated working in the sugarcane estates with slavery, and they wanted a clean break. So they left the estates, and then the estates were abandoned, and there was a sugar crisis. And so the European planters imported Chinese, in Suriname, Javanese indented workers. There was an experiment, and East Indians filled that gap, that vacuum. They were brought mainly from North India, traveling through the port of Calcutta in the north, and some came from south, Madras, through the Madras port. East Indians came on the same ships that brought the slaves because they were replacing the slaves. When they came here, they lived in the same barracks as the ex-slaves. They worked in the same estates. It was a cruel and harsh experience for a lot of indented immigrants. Many of them committed suicide. Some of them jumped aboard the ship when they were coming. In the Guadeloupe, for instance, almost half of the immigrants died because of the harsh conditions that they had to endure. The bulk of Indians from India came to Trinidad, some to Guyana, some to Suriname, and some to Jamaica in the larger island, and they worked for a period of about 5 years, after which they were offered a free return passage back home. More than half of them decided to stay because they had established friends and they probably got married and so on, and they developed a special relationship to the land and a new environment and decided to stay. So about 500,000 people came to the Caribbean during this scheme of indentureship, and you can find most of them today in the larger islands. In Trinidad, at this point, they're almost half of the population, about 40%. In Guyana and Suriname, they're about the same number. And so the state and the descendants have contributed significantly to the development of the country in politics, in economics, in literature, in almost every sphere of life in the Caribbean.
Dr. Kumar Mahabir is a renowned anthropologist who has over many years contributed to documenting and preserving Indian culture throughout Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean diaspora.
So I was born in a rural community of Sangre Grande. Most people have the stereotype of Indians as from central and south, but I don't know that sugarcane culture at all. I grew up in a different environment of cocoa, coffee, citrus, watermelons, planting rice as a young boy, catching crabs in Manzalina nearby. Growing up in the countryside, I always wanted to capture that rural environment and to capture people who live in that particular landscape. When you look at mainstream media, for instance, you would see that there's a lot of coverage of urban people and urban environment. And when you look at the television stations now, you see about 90% of them based in Port of Spain. Radio stations the same way. Now there are a couple media houses in Central and South Trinidad. So the coverage has always been on urban community. And I wanted to capture the rural community, a different way of life, a different culture. And that drew me to anthropology, studying culture, but culture of a different strain, of a different variety. So it's not a question of non-representation, it's underrepresentation. So let's look at the publications that I have done and the research that I have done that went into the publication. For instance, on medicinal and edible plants. It is subtitled Medicinal and Edible Plants Used by East Indians of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, when I wrote that book and published it somewhere around 1990, there were a number of books on medicinal plants in the country, but these books didn't really capture the plants that were used mainly and almost exclusively by the East Indians, like the hardi, for instance, which is a turmeric. And a number of Indians and Hindus in particular use for ritual purposes, which you would see a lot of these plants grown and cultivated around the jandi, that flag that you would see usually in front of their homes. So there were a lot of plants that were used by East Indians but were not really documented. So my quest in promoting East Indian culture is to fill that vacuum that has been existing and still exists to some extent today. When we look at my other publication, for instance, on Indian-Caribbean folklore spirits, for quite some time until now, when we talk about folklore spirits, we think of Lagahu, Laja Bless, Duen, Sukuya, and so on. A little has been known about the Indian folklore spirits. They have been existing here since the time of indentureship, since 1845. Nobody has researched this, nobody has documented this. So until now, whenever you ask children or adults and so on to list the names of folklore spirits, they would tell you about Lagahu and Laja Bless, which are French or French-derived Creole spirits which populate the landscape. So it's really to fill a vacuum that is behind my initiative in doing this research, and it's really sometimes to complement the research that has already been done.
The introduction of East Indians to the socio-cultural landscape of Trinidad and Tobago can be attributed to an economic necessity during colonial times. But it was a moment in our history which significantly impacted the pluralistic landscape of our cosmopolitan island.
Hosay, in a way, has defined Trinidad and Tobago because it's one of the few countries in the Western Hemisphere that observes Hosay. We should be very happy that we are in Trinidad and we are Trinidadians and Tobagonians. Observance like Hosay, for instance, is celebrated only in Trinidad in a large scale. So we should be very proud of that. We have added something new to that cultural mosaic. And Hosay takes place in St. James, not a rural community, but urban. Hosay is observed to some extent in Cedrus, but what is interesting as an anthropologist is that most of the traditional trappings of Hosay are retained in St. James and not Cedrus. So this is quite remarkable because we tend to think that if you are looking for Indian culture, you would find Indian culture in rural communities. Here it is something that has been sustained for over 150 years in an urban community in St. James. What is remarkable about Hosay too in St. James is that you have a lot of participation across the racial and ethnic divide. So you have a lot of Hindus, a lot of non-Indians, Chinese, Africans, almost everybody taking part in Hosay in St. James. And then we have Divali, which is grand, which is celebrated by everyone. It's now a national holiday. And we have really invented some new things about Divali. Yes, Divali is celebrated almost everywhere else in the world, wherever you find Hindus. But the whole innovation of bursting bamboo, for instance, making cannons, that is very innovative and perhaps, if not indigenous to Trinidad and Tobago. And then the pattern that we have developed, which again is akin to the way we do wire bending in carnival. So there's a lot of overlap and interaction with all celebrations. We don't live in separate compartments. I mean, it's difficult to define an Indian community nowadays, or define an African community, or define a Chinese community, since the community has grown so fluid, and almost every other family in Trinidad has a member of that family from another ethnic group. Perhaps it is the wire bending skill of the carnival has seeped into the Diwali celebration, where people who participate in Diwali cut the trunks of the bamboo and they make all kinds of patterns. Again, it's remarkable, and I think this is a really blessed land that we have so many cultural strains, all intermingling, all interlapping, all borrowing from each other in this country. So Diwali is really a climax for all of these celebrations, and Diwali usually falls at the end of the year, October, November, and it's really a showcase of Indian culture in the country. So Ramleela now is another celebration. In the run-up to Diwali, you have Ramleela, which is not celebrated in Suriname, which is not celebrated in Guyana. It's only in Trinidad you have Ramleela. It's such a great event, so extraordinary, that Derek Walcott mentioned it in his speech, acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize. And it was not just like a footnote, he went at great length talking about the drama of Ramleela in that acceptance speech. So those who are interested can still go to the internet and Google and find the statements he has made about Ramleela. So it's remarkable that we have Ramleela, and we have Diwali, and we have Hosay, and these are the major festivals that are celebrated by Indians in Trinidad and Tobago.
Dr. Kumar Mahabir remains committed to promoting and preserving the legacy left by our East Indian ancestors through documenting and highlighting many facets of the culture that is still practiced today.
I am chairman of Chakra Publishing House, which publishes books exclusively on the theme of the Indian presence in the Caribbean. And then we have Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, and we publish magazines. Two magazines every year, Diwali magazine and an Indian Arrival Day magazine. And every year we choose a theme. So the one which comes to mind, the magazine I have in front of me, is this Indian Arrival Day magazine, published in 2006. And this magazine I highlighted Indo-Trinidadians, or Indians for short, who have starred, who have been featured in cinematic movies. In the early days, the 1960s, Basdev Pandey, when he was a law student in England, he enrolled in drama school, and he did make some short appearances in some movies, at least 3 that I know, and they are featured in these magazines, the 3 movies. We took snapshots of the magazines, where I was able to get the DVD and so on, and I gave it to my computer technician, and he was able to take stills of the movies. And then we have Errol Sitahal, for instance, who still works with Banyan, and he was featured in a number of movies like Harold and Kumar, which is very popular. And then he was featured in Little Princess. So he really made it big, because he appeared in a Hollywood movie, Errol Sitahal. And then you have Ralph Maraj, of course, who acted in Bim and Right and the Wrong. So these are just 3 Indians who have made it on the big screen. So that's the theme of this magazine. There are other magazines like this one here, which is on the theme of Indian historical and heritage sites in Trinidad and Tobago. And what we have done in this magazine is to go to some of the sites, take photographs, do the research, and write stories. Our theme this year for Indian Arrival Day 2011 is the Indian Diaspora in Belize, Guadeloupe, and Suriname. For Diwali coming, the theme will be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Diwali Nagar. And last year for Indian Arrival Day, the theme was really a coverage of a rural East Indian community called Kernahan, or Kernaham as the people say. It's a little village which is kind of invisible to the general population, situated close to Mafikin, near to Mayaro. It's hidden in the coconut estates, and for quite some time they had no electricity and pipe-borne water, and they had to walk through the swamp to get to the main road. And for that magazine I've studied the community, and I've done like a photographic essay of the community to highlight in that magazine.
Contributions from Indo-Trinidadians have permeated many aspects of our society, and we can find their influence in a wide array of disciplines.
Indians, I think, have made the greatest contribution to food, cuisine, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but in Belize, where I've done some research and which I'm writing about. East Indians have made significant contribution in that they have a special way of preparing the curry made with turmeric. In Jamaica, curry goat is almost a national dish. In Trinidad, Indians have made significant contribution in inventing the doubles. You can't find doubles anywhere else except in Trinidad. If you find it in New York or in Queens or in Fort Lauderdale or even Guyana, it's usually a Trinidadian who is behind its manufacture. So we have invented the doubles, and we have added our own touch in making a number of dishes. So in a number of ways, Indians have contributed significantly to the table in preparing all of these dishes. They have contributed, of course, V.S. Naipaul, who has won the Nobel Prize, the only Trinidadian to win a Nobel Prize up to this day. And he's known the world over. He's read. They may not know anything else about Trinidad, but foreigners know V.S. Naipaul. So contributed significantly to politics. They've always been involved in politics since independence, and even before, together with Dr. Williams. You had Dr. Capeleu. In those days there was the doctor politics, so you had to have someone with a doctorate contend with a rival who has a doctorate. And now Indians and the world over is proud that we do not only have our first woman or first female prime minister, but also a person who is of East Indian descent. And she's not only Miss Kamala Persad-Bissessar, is not only the first female prime minister of Trinidad and Tobago, but she is the first female prime minister of the Indian diaspora. Mauritius has not produced an Indian female prime minister. Fiji, Suriname, Guyana, Jamaica, right? It's Trinidad and Tobago.
This Indian Arrival Day, let us all be aware of and celebrate the many contributions that the arrival East Indians have made. Their religious festivals, pantheon of gods, culinary skills, music, arts and literature have found a home right here in Trinidad and Tobago, adding to the rich cultural landscape which we can all call our own.